Hello everybody, Low for Life here, bringing us a brand new video, and today we have another archetype analysis of cubics. Now, you might remember, if you've been around for a long time on this channel, that I've already covered cubics. I've already done an archetype analysis of them. Well, this is actually an archetype reanalysis, because, for one thing, it's been a few years, and secondly, cubics have got the new support, and I really want to be able to talk about them and update my thoughts and opinions on it. Additionally, when I did my original analysis of cubics, it was with the old style, where I would literally just pull up YgoPro, search for all the cards and pull them up on there, and talk about them on YgoPro. That was bad, I don't like it, and I want to go back and fix it. So with reanalysis, we're going to go and take a look at all of those old archetypes that I talked about in the past, reanalyze them, re-talk about them, and give you my updated thoughts and opinions on them, especially since a lot of them have got the new support since. And I wanted to start off with cubics, because I love cubics. You guys know I love cubics. They're one of my favorite archetypes, and they're just such a fun archetype to play around with, and I could talk about them for hours. I hope this video doesn't last for hours, but we will see. So, let's get on with it and start talking about what the heck are cubics. Cubics are an interesting archetype in the sense that they have different ways to build them. The way that Konami intended you to play it is to be able to basically summon out the seed and then constantly change it out for the bigger versions, and then possibly maybe go into Crimson Nova or the other boss monsters. It's very interesting. Back when Konami first talked about it, the deck was supposed to change its levels and stuff and get different effects based on that, but I guess they changed around the idea and playstyle around that. It still has the same initial concept in that the seed, which is level 1, has its effects, and then there's the level 2s, the level 3s, the level 4s, then it skyrockets to level 10, then you got the level 12 boss monster, and how they all have different lines and similarities between their effects based on what levels you're talking about. And so therefore, you have different ways of playing it. You can do that, which is just following the Beast and Emperor line, and that is fine and dandy, and it's fun occasionally, but good luck actually doing well in a tournament with it. The main way to go about playing cubics, though, is to focus on their insane OTK potential. Cubics have one of the best boss monsters in a rogue archetype, arguably even in some of the more competitive ones too, in the sense that Crimson Nova is incredibly easy to summon and is an immediate threat on the board and can easily result in an OTK with just one Crimson Nova. Never mind the fact that you can summon up to 3 very easily in this deck. So, therefore, the main way to focus on cubics is the OTK build with Crimson Nova. It's basically Crimson Nova spam, Crimson Nova turbo, whatever you want to call it. You want to summon him repeatedly and just win the game as fast as possible with his insane amount of damage he can do. The main issue with the Beast and Emperor line is that the vast majority of cubics, with the exception of 2 main deck monsters, cannot be normal summoner set. Even though they're level 4 or lower, they just cannot be. That is very, very, very annoying, and I wish Konami would have allowed us to at least set them, you know, to not get even without getting their effects and stuff. But I digress. It's very, very annoying, and it's something you got to keep in mind if you're going to play with the Beast and Emperor line. Then also the deck has random counters spoursed throughout, with cubic counters being, quite honestly, one of the best kinds of counters in the game. Mainly because cubic counters, whenever they're on a monster, their effects are negated, and some cards also drop their attack to 0 with cubic counters. That is really, really good. Effect negation, just great. I don't need to explain why, but however, cubic counters, they're only really involved with a handful of the cards in the archetype, and are not a main, how do I say, source of the deck's playstyle. It's not a main part of the deck's playstyle. It just happens to be an extra aspect of it. So, moving on, let's start off with talking about the little dude, Ygopro, the Cubic Seed. He's a level 1 Dark Fiend effect monster, 0 attack, 0 defense. Cannot be destroyed by battle, and has this effect. At the end of the damage step, if this card battled an opponent's monster, you can place this card face up in your spell and trap card zone as a continuous spell card. And if you do, place 1 cubic counter on that opponent's monster. Monsters with cubic counters cannot attack and negate their effects. If this card is treated as a continuous spell, by this effect, during your main phase you can spell summon this card from your spell and trap card zone. This is a secret Crystal Beast that does Crystal Beast stuff way better than Crystal Beast. And my god, it is great for Cubics. The big thing is that he's just another good Cubic name, and a lot of the Cubic cards focus on using this card. So you don't really use him as much for his own effect, but you more so use him as a resource and a tool. For instance, there's a spell card that lets you send one to the graveyard from your hand, deck, or field in order to increase the attack of one of your Cubic monsters by 800 for each 1 cent. So, yeah, this thing is really just kind of there as a resource. Now, that being said, though, you can use his effects. They're good effects. This is good effects on a card. They're just not really for what the deck wants to do. They're not OTK focused. They're defense focused. But there are ways to use it offensively. For instance, if your opponent has something that's going to prevent your Crimson Nova from being able to attack or something, you can normal summon V-Jump, attack into it with V-Jump, take a bit of battle damage, or not, thanks to one of the other spell cards, and then, oh, V-Jump effect. Place him in the back row, put a cubic counter on it, that card now has its effects negated, and then maybe Crimson Nova can go for the game. This is a really, really integral card to the entire archetype, and no matter what build you are playing, you need 3. Very, very simple. Play 3 in pretty much any build of Cubics. I can't even think of a build of Cubics where you wouldn't want to play any, so yes, play 3. Moving on, we got Duza, the Meteor Cubic Vessel. This is one of the most important cards in the archetype, with no exaggeration. I must also apologize for the poor image quality. He's only available as a gold secret, and my god, finding a good clean image of him is not easy. So, he's a level 4 light machine effect monster, 1600 attack, 1600 defense. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can send 1 cubic card from your deck to the graveyard. That's not once per turn. That's just right off there. That card, that effect right there, you can ignore the entire rest of this card's effect, mostly because it mostly is ignored. But yeah, right there, send a cubic card from your deck to the graveyard on normal or special summon, not once per turn. This is insane for what Cubics need and do. Because of this, you can dump any of your spells and traps. And it's mainly your spells and traps that you're going to be sending, because Cubics, their spells and traps, are some of the best designed spells and traps I've seen for a archetype. The biggest thing is that they all have an effect on field and effect in graveyard, or at least most of them do. And so having those graveyard effects easily utilized, and a lot of them they have their graveyard effects be the better effect, Duza just lets you instantly get to that. I can end talking about him right there with that line of text, but however, they had to give him a random attack boost effect. Basically, once per turn during Eofor's turn, if a monster is sent to your graveyard this turn while this card was face up on the field, you can make this card gain 200 attack for each monster of a different name in your graveyard until the end of this turn. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but it's not something particularly great. You can make it into a sort of like cheesy big damage thing. I think personally speaking, I've only ever gotten them up to like 3,300. That's with multiple cubics in graveyard and multiple hand traps in graveyard. But however, oh wait, you can't get them to 33, 32, I guess. I don't know. But however, it's not something that's going to come up very often. More often than not, you're going to pump him up to 1,800 or 2,000. And really, he's just a level 4, 18 or 2,000 beater. That is nice and all, but however, that's not what he's mainly intended here for. You're mainly using him for that first effect to get stuff in your graveyard so that you can keep on using your graveyard effects. And this is one of the biggest things with Cubics. Notice how there's no once per turn. I cannot stress that enough. Most Cubic cards are not once per turn with any of their effects. If Cubics get like 1 or 2 broken cards and become meta, it's going to be because of that. They're not once per turn. These are designed like an old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters card anime archetype. And for very good reason, because what they kind of are. Anyway, I cannot stress this enough. You play 3 Duza. You play 3 Duza. Very simple. Now we start getting into the weird stuff. Ghoul, the Cubic King. This is one of the two lines, the King/Emperor and the Beast Saints. I think they're also still a beast, I don't know. Anyway, Ghoul, the Cubic King. Level 2, Wind, Fairy, Effect Monster, 0 attack, 0 defense. Cannot be normal summoned or set. Must first be special summoned from your hand by sending one cubic monster you control to the graveyard. If summoned this way, this card gains 800 attack. If this card is special summoned from the hand, inflict 800 damage to your opponent. At the end of the damage step, if this card battled, you can target up to 2 Ygopro, the Cubic Seed, in your graveyard. Send this card to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon them. Then you can add one Dragni, the Cubic King, from your deck to your hand. This is where we start seeing where the deck kind of gets a bit iffy. The next 6 cards, including Ghoul here, all are built like this. They are all where you have to send Ygopro or a number of cubics that you control to the graveyard to special summon them. They will gain attack based on how many you sent, and then they have the effect to where after they battled or after they destroy a monster in battle, depending on which one you're talking about, they send themselves to the graveyard, target the next number of cubic seeds you need, special summon them, and then search out the next level up. That's kind of the idea of this. They kind of remind me of level monsters in that way, where they level themselves up into the next one, but they do it in a very weird and convoluted way. That being said, though, even in the OTK builds where you're focusing on Crimson Nova, you need to play a couple of them. Mainly because there's just not enough cubic cards to go around, and Crimson Nova, it needs 3 different cubic monsters, or 3 different cubic cards with different names, in order to be able to be summoned. So you need to play as many names as possible, while also balancing that out by not playing as many of the bad ones. And don't get me wrong, I like the King and the Beast lines here, but they are not particularly great for what the deck really wants to do. For the good version of the deck, I should say, because you can not really make use of these very well. If you play too many of them, you can brick very easily. None of them can be normal summoned or set. You're relying entirely on drawing Duza or Ygopro, and that is the issue with the Kings and the Beasts. They need Ygopro or Duza, or heck, some other way of getting themselves on the board, which there are. Some of the spells and traps allow you to cheese these guys out without any issue, but that's not the point. You shouldn't need to cheese them out. I don't see why I can't just normal summon the Ghoul if I need to, and send them to the graveyard for another one. It's very, very, very obnoxious, and it helps make the deck that much worse if you are playing too many of these guys. Speaking of, let's talk about Dragni, the Cubic Beast. He's a level 2 Earth Beast, 0 attack, 0 defense, has the exact same effect as Ghoul, but does not do effect damage, and he goes up to 1000 attack. When he destroys a monster in battle, you can target 2 Ygopro, special summon him, and then add a Blade Garoooda from the Cubic Beast from your deck to your hand. And that's my big issue with the beasts. Personally, I like the King route because you don't have to worry about having to kill a monster in battle. You can just attack directly with them, or just battle in general. And also, they do a little bit of effect damage whenever they're summoned. The beasts do not. The beasts get a little bit more attack so that they can hopefully run over something in battle, so you can hopefully trigger their effect to summon 2 Ygopro from graveyard and level them up. But, however, it's still not particularly great. Dragni is the worst of the cubics, purely because he's got to run something over in battle, and has only a measly 1000 attack power. Like, how are you supposed to be able to run over something? Next up, we got Dragni, the Cubic King. This is the guy that ranks up from Ghoul. Dragni, you send 2 cubics to your graveyard, summon him. He goes up to 1600. If he's summoned, he does 800 damage to your opponent. After he battles, you can send him to the graveyard, special summon 3 Ygopro from your graveyard, and then you can add an Endoria Doomvault, the Cubic Emperor, from your deck to your hand. Again, if you're going to play any of these guys, play the King line, just simply because you don't have to worry about having to run anything over in battle with them. Next up, we got Blade Garooodia, the Cubic Beast. He's a fire, level 3, has 2000 attack. You send 2 to the graveyard, special summon him. You can attack twice, which is pretty cool. Actually, I really do like that. I have played around with like one Garoooda, just in case. But, however, anyway, he's not particularly great. 2000 attack though is a lot better than 1000. After he kills something in battle, you can target up to 3 Fiend the Cubic Seed in your graveyard, send this card to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon him. Then add 1 Buster Gundil, the Cubic Behemoth, from your deck to your hand. Not much more to say there. Now, it's the level 4s. I do recommend you play at least one of each, okay? Mainly because the level 4s are the best of the bunch from their respective lines, and there are ways, again, to cheese them out so that you can get their effects. And the big effect is their last effect, because they both do the same thing as their last effect. So, Indiora, Doomvolt, the Cubic Emperor, level 4 Light Fairy, cannot be normal summoned or set, must be spell summoned from your hand by sending 3 Cubic monsters you control to the graveyard, and cannot be spell summoned by other ways. If summoned this way, this card gains 2,400 attack. If this card is spell summoned from the hand, inflict 800 damage to your opponent. If this card in your possession is sent to your graveyard by your opponent's card, by battle or card effect, you can target up to 3 of your Cubic monsters in your graveyard, special summon them. Then you can add a Cubic card from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Now, before I talk about him, let's also talk about Buster Gundil, who does the exact same thing to a T, except he gains 3,000 attack and can make 3 attacks during each battle phase. He has the exact same final effect as well, where you can target up to 3 of your Cubic monsters in your graveyard if it gets destroyed, and then you can add a Cubic card from your deck to your hand. Or graveyard, deck or graveyard. They both do that. I never noticed you can add it from graveyard. So, Indiora and Buster Gundil are the 2 best of their respective lines. They're the end goals. They're the boss monsters of the King and the Beast, so to speak, lines. And so, therefore, they are the best of the best in their respective lines. That being said, though, they still have problems. You're not going to be summoning them very often, if ever, with their own inherent effects. I think I've done it once or twice myself, mainly because Buster Gundil's 3 attacks is just really ridiculous with his 3k attack power. That being said, though, the main way you're going to be summoning them in a standard Cubic deck is with one of the trap cards that, well, brings them out. If like one of your Cubics is sent to the graveyard, you can banish it, special summon a dude from your deck, ignoring summoning conditions. But, however, it can't be destroyed by battle or card effects that turn. Cool. Well, so you summon one of these guys as a chum blocker, and then your opponent does kill it some way or somehow, or heck, during your turn, which is really where it gets fun, you switch them to attack mode, kamikaze into something, let them die, target 3 Dooza in graveyard, special summon them all, add a Crimson Nova from deck to hand, all 3 Dooza trigger, dumping 3 more spells and traps to your graveyard. This is where it gets really cheesy with these cards, and honestly, if you're going to play any of them, focus on good Indiora, Doomvolt, and Buster Gundil for the extra names you need, along with maybe a Ghoul and a Dragni if you really need it. Honestly, you don't super need them. I like one Ghoul just because he's an extra cheeser, but however, you don't really need Blade Garooodia or Dragni. Moving on, though, let's talk about the big boy. The main one that really does matter. Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord. He's a level 10 Dark Fiend effect monster. 3k attack, 0 defense. Cannot be normal summoned or set. Must be special summoned from your hand by revealing 3 other Cubic cards in your hand with different names, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. Unaffected by other monsters' activated effects whose original attack is 3,000 or less. When this attacking card destroys a monster at battle, you can activate this effect. This card can make a second attack during the battle phase. During your end phase, each player takes 3,000 damage. You can only use this effect of Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord, once per turn. Oh boy, a lot to unpack here. So first and foremost, this thing is super easy to summon, only by having to reveal 3 different Cubics in your hand. It can be monsters, can be spells and traps, whatever. Just reveal 3 different ones. Bam, he's on the board. He's unaffected by all activated monster effects whose original attack is 3k or less. This is big. Okay? This means if your opponent has good old Boral Sword Dragon, he can't switch him to defense because he's at 3k. And even if he does jump up thanks to his own effect, he won't knock down Crimson Nova. So, you don't have to worry about a lot of the standard monster effects out there in the meta. You only really have to worry about a handful of them, and even then, this thing is not going to get touched by monsters very much ever. It's absolutely ridiculous. The only thing that can really impede this card is somebody jacking up a monster so it can run it over. As much as I said that Boros Sword Dragon's not much of an issue, mainly because it cannot switch him to defense, Boros Sword can still gain attack power, and so yeah, he can still run over Crimson Nova, and he's your main issue to have to deal with in Cubics, in all honesty, at least in my experience, so you do gotta keep that in mind. Then you also have the fact that this thing is double attacker. It can attack twice. You run over something, you can attack a second time. And that is absolutely ridiculous because, oh hey, I killed my opponent's monster, now I can run it over another one, or I can attack directly. Moreover, it's not once per turn. If you have multiple Crimson Novas out, they all can attack twice. And that is where this deck gets really dangerous with how much damage it can get, because if you get multiple Crimson Novas out, you're going to be able to attack like 2, 4, 6 times depending on how many monsters your opponent has. And that just enables so much damage. And then there's that 3k burn. That 3k burn, I don't believe it works in the TCG, but I believe in the OCG it can cause ties, or at least it's done it to me on YgoPro. I don't know, YgoPro goes by OCG rules. But however, 3k damage to both players. If you're going second, and you summon out Crimson Nova, and you summon out a second Crimson Nova, and you just start tearing apart your enemy's board, you're going to be able to dish out upwards of 9,000 plus damage with incredible ease with this card, with multiples especially. Now, with only one of them, you really can't hit that much. It's very much harder to get an OTK out of just one Crimson Nova, unless you have one of the spells and traps to back them up. But, however, if you have multiples out, they can end a game very, very quickly, and that 3k damage really helps out because your opponent will think, oh, we're in a clear, it's in a battle phase, oh, end phase 3k burn. Make no matter of fact that if you happen to make 3 of these guys out in the field, you can then use 2 of them to go into good old Gustav Max to get an additional 2,000 damage, and then hey, the third one will still ping for 3,000, so that's 5,000 right there. It's ridiculous. I love it. You play 3. This is your boss monster. This is really the only one that matters at the end of the day, a lot of the time, for, well, actually closing out the game. But we still have one more monster to talk about. That being Crimson Nova Trinity, the Dark Cubic Lord. Yes, there's a fusion with 3 Crimson Novas. Oh boy. So, Fiend Fusion Effect Monster. Needs 3 of the Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord. 4,500 attack, 3k defense. Oh, and he's level 10. I thought he was level 12. His Dark Fiend Fusion. Must be fusion summoned with the above fusion materials and cannot be spell summoned by other ways. Cannot be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects. When this card declares an attack, have your opponent's life points. When this card destroys a monster by battle, you can activate this effect. This card can make a second attack during battle phase. If you take effect damage, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the damage you took. This thing is such a one more card. I love it. So this is Crimson Nova Trinity, your boss, like your end game true boss monster, so to speak. Or at least that's what Konami wants you to think. You can actually build a deck around focusing on summoning this guy, and it does work. It's a lot of fun, but however, it's a bit more of a win more. It's just easier to go for the standard Crimson Nova because he can just dish out the same amount of damage himself. But Crimson Nova, he can attack your opponent directly, and on attack declaration, half your opponent's life points, and then do 4,500 battle damage. He, of course, can attack twice, and each attack causes your opponent to lose half their life points. He's immune to basically everything, with being immune to being targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects. He can still be sent to the graveyard, he can still be destroyed by battle. I'm a bit exaggerating when I typed up he's immune to everything. And then on top of that, if you take effect damage from whatever, it does effect damage back to your opponent equal to damage you took. Meaning, this card actually works really well if you have a regular Crimson Nova out. Because if you have a regular Crimson Nova out, at the end phase, you both take 3,000 damage. And then, oh, you took 3,000 damage, Crimson Nova Trinity effect. Burn your opponent for another 3,000. Oh boy, this thing is ridiculous. It's definitely a win more card. But however, because the extra to cubics is super, super loose, you can play one of them. You can make the room for one of them and be just fine. especially since you do play Diffusion Trap. Even without playing Diffusion, it's just worth putting in there because, oh, once in a blue moon, you'll summon him. It has come up, and I love it when it does, because this thing is just such a cheese card. I love it. Oh, boy. Moving on, let's talk about the spells and traps. Starting with Cubic Wave. This is a normal spell card, and if you open this with summoning out Crimson Nova, it's just ridiculous. Target one cubic monster you control and one face-up monster your opponent controls. The attack of that monster you control becomes double its current attack, and if it does, the attack of that monster your opponent controls becomes half its current attack. You can banish this card on any number of cubic monsters from your graveyard, then target face-up monsters your opponent controls equal to the number of those banished cubic monsters. Place one cubic counter on each of them. Monsters with cubic counter cannot attack, also negate their effects. This is not a once per turn on either of its effects. And the big one is, of course, that activated effect from hand, making one of your cubics double its attack and then having your opponent's attack. Now, this is intended to enable the beasts and emperors, the beasts and kings, to be able to attack over more stuff because their attacks are garbage. But what you can do and what you really should do is target Crimson Nova, turning him into a 6k beater and turning something else into a half k loser. And then you can activate a second one to make Crimson Nova 12,000. That's 12 with 3 zeros behind it. And then if you really wanted to, you have a third wave, target it again and turn him into 24,000. It's so stupid the amount of damage this deck can do. Oh, I love it. So yeah, you play 3 of this. Its effect in graveyard comes up once in a blue moon, but hey, free effect negation on stuff is super handy, so keep that in mind whenever you're playing the deck, and don't forget about it. I've done that, and it's not fun. Oh boy, it only gets better from here for the most part too with the spells. Cubic Karma, it's a continuous spell card. When this card is activated, you can target a cubic monster you control, except Vijam the Cubic Seed. Send any number of Vijam the Cubic Seed from your hand and or deck to the graveyard, then that monster gains 800 attack for each, even if this card leaves the field. During your opponent's turn, if Vijam the Cubic Seed is special summoned by the effect of a cubic monster, send this card to the graveyard, and if you do, have your opponent's life points. You can banish this card from your graveyard, add one cubic monster from your deck to your hand. So this thing's got 3 effects, all of which are good, but only like one of them you're going to be using most of the time. So when it's activated, target a cubic, send any number of Vijam from your hand or deck to the graveyard, boom, you got 2,400 more attack on it. That right there is also really good being used on Crimson Nova, but you can use it on the other like small fry, like the Beasts and the Emperors, to be able to really get extra buffs on them to be able to run over stuff. That's cool. That being said though, let's talk about that second effect. During your opponent's turn, if a Vijam is summoned by the effect of a cubic monster, you get sent to the graveyard and have your opponent's life points. That does not come up very often, but man is it mean when it does, because, oh hey, you killed my Andoria Doomfoe, okay, effect, special summon Vijam. Half your opponent's life points. What's up with the halving life points in this deck? I love it. And then finally, if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it from your graveyard, add a cubic monster from your deck to your hand. It's a searcher. And then on top of those other effects, it's a searcher. And none of them, not a one of these 3 effects are once per turn. Not a single one. Where does it say once per turn on any of this card text? Nowhere! Nowhere! There's no once per turn on it. Anywhere! You can send this card to the graveyard with Duza or Full Spirit of Goods and get a search right then and there. Or you can activate it, target a dude, get some extra attack buffs, and then play, I don't know, what is it called again? Oh yes, that's right. Magician Souls, special summoning it from your hand, send it to the graveyard, draw a couple cards, search out a couple cards. This deck really benefits from having Magician Souls in it. I almost called it Cubic Souls. That'd make for a good idea for a card. Konami, do that, please. So, Cubic Karma, play 3. I cannot stress enough that you play 3 of this. Next up, we got Cubic Dharma, continuous spell card again. You take no battle damage from attacks involving your cubic monsters. They gave you a way to be able to ram stuff with freaking Vijam and not have to worry about taking a crap ton of damage. Oh god, I love it. That is nice. It's an effect that you often forget about. I'll be honest, I do too. But man, is it nice just to have that right there first thing on the text. And then they finally slap some once per turn clauses on these cards. You can only use each of the following effects of Cubic Dharma once per turn during your main phase. You can send one Cubic card from your hand to the graveyard, and if you do, draw a card. Just flat out right there, really good. Discarding Karma to draw with Dharma, effective Karma to search, so on and so forth. You can banish this card from your graveyard and target a Cubic monster in your graveyard, add it to your hand. This is really, really, really nice. It combos really well with Fusion Summoning Crimson Nova Trinity, so you can add back Crimson Nova regular from your deck to your, from your graveyard to your hand. So then you can hopefully plop them on the field and get some extra damage in. Not that you really need it if you summon Trinity, but hey, it's there. And then also the bigger thing is that you're able to re-grab Duza, Vjam, any of the Emperors and Beasts and all that fun stuff. It just helps out with recursion, and recursion is always nice. So with this card, I really recommend playing 2 to 3 of it. You don't need 3, but it is nice to play 3, especially since it's another good name for Cubics. And on top of that, there's no way to search out the spells and traps. And that's my biggest issue with this deck. There's no way to search out the spells and traps, which means you have to hard draw them all, which really, really sucks. This deck needs a way to search out its spells and traps so that we can get Wave and Karma to our hand and make it a bit more consistent. But that's just me. Moving on, we got, well, the trap cards. Unification of the Cubic Lords. This is a fusion trap card, and it's a good one. Fusion summon one Cubic fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. It's probably but a trap card for Cubics. This would be more important if Cubics actually had more fusion monsters, which is something I'd actually like to see. Give us more fusion monsters, you know. Maybe like make it so that like you have a fusion of like Vjam with another monster or something. It'd be interesting. And I feel like it's a way that Konami can expand on the deck without making it overly broken by giving them more extract monsters. I want to see that happen. But the big reason why you play 3 of this card is its second effect. If a face-up Cubic monster is destroyed by battle or leaves the field, you can banish this card from your graveyard. Spell summon one level 4 or lower Cubic monster from your hand or deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. And if you do, it cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects this turn. This, again, no once per turn. Okay, just right off the bat, no once per turn on it. But, if any of your Cubics leaves the field for whatever reason, you can special summon any of them from your deck. With Duza, this turns into an easy link climbing shenanigans, okay? Summon Duza and then have, like, I don't know, Summoner Monk on the field, because Summoner Monk's very good in this deck. So you discard Karma, special summon Duza from deck. Karma effect search out Crimson Nova. Duza effect dumping another unification into the graveyard. Just link off for a link 2. Any link 2. Doesn't matter. Let's just say Nightmare Cerberus, okay? Effective unification in graveyard. Since Duza just left the field, banish it. Special summon another Duza from deck. Effective Duza, sending another unification to the graveyard. Link for a Unicorn. Effective unification in the graveyard. Banish it. Special summon another Duza from deck. Duza effect, sending another unification to the graveyard. And then link off for, like, I don't know, a big link for, like, Access Code Talker. I think you can make him in that scenario. It's just a sample of what you can do. This thing allows you to link climb. It also allows you to just stall and drag out that grind game, because it cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. The monster you summon, that is ridiculous. Not only does this deck have insane amount of OTK potential, but because of unification, you can drag out games as long as you want almost. Now, obviously, there's a limit due to, well, unification only being 3 of. You can't play an infinite number of them. But, however, it allows you to drag out the game that much longer so that you can hopefully get out Crimson Nova and go for the offense instead of the defense. This is a really good card. You play 3. I cannot stress that enough. Then we got Cubic Casualty. Or sorry, Causality? Is it Casualty or... No, yeah, it is Causality. I prefer to call it Casualty, though, because that's what I've been calling it, but it's Causality. Anyway, so, normal trap card. Distribute a number of Cubic counters on face-up monsters your opponent controls up to the number of Cubic monsters you control. Monsters or Cubic counters cannot attack, also negate their effects. You can banish this card from your graveyard and target one Cubic monster you control. This turn, each time it destroys a monster by battle that has a Cubic counter, Inflict damage to your opponent equal to the original attack of that destroyed monster. You can only use each effect of cubic causality once per turn. Okay, so right off the bat, this is the best way to spread cubic counters other than using Wave's effect in your graveyard. So you activate it from your field, put a bunch of counters on stuff, negate stuff. That is really nice. This deck needs more negation. That's one of the big issues with it, is that it just doesn't have enough negation or defense, really. In fact, its best defense is unification, which you mainly want to use for link climbing and offense. It's not really the greatest thing in the world to use as defense. So cubic causality gives you a good amount of good old defense, and that is wonderful. Getting this on the board, or drawing into it, I should say, because there's still no searcher for spells and traps. Yeah, along with a Crimson Nova or two, and then like maybe a Dooza. Oh, your opponent tries to pop off, ha, causality. And then, yeah, that's just really nice. And then you got the effect in graveyard. So, it makes the OTK even better. It makes it even easier, I should say. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but basically it allows you to turn your Crimson Nova into Flame Wingman. And that is wonderful. Now, it's really more of a win more card because the deck could already do lots of OTKs without having to utilize causality, but it does help out in certain scenarios, especially in scenarios where your opponent has maybe a bunch of monsters and you can't get a direct attack in, or maybe you don't draw Wave or Karma to be able to pump up your Crimson Nova, so it helps you get more damage in. It's really that simple. It's just a wonderfully good card all around. Because there's no way to search it out, I highly recommend to play 3 just so that you see it more often. Then we got Cubic Ascension. This card, I really want to say is good, but man, it's a defense-oriented card in an OTK deck. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, special summon 1 V-Jom to Cubic Seed from your deck, and if you do, change the attack target to it, and perform damage calculation. If your opponent's life points are at least 2,000 higher than yours, you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon 1 V-Jom to Cubic Seed from your hand, deck, or graveyard. Then, if only your opponent controlled a monster and this effect was activated, you can special summon up to 2 more V-Jom to Cubic Seed. You can only use this effect of Cubic Ascension once per turn. So what this card is meant to do is act as a deterrent, redirecting your opponent's monster's attacks to a V-Jom, so you can start spreading counters and then get a free monster out. Cool. Then this card has the effect in graveyard to let you basically cheese out, hopefully, 3 V-Jom. Now, this is good in theory. The biggest issue I have of it is that it just never comes up. Because of Crimson Nova just keeping that pressure on both players and keeping the life points down, it's not going to be very often where you're going to be at such a disadvantage in life points. Moreover, it just doesn't do much for what the deck wants to do. Now, this is really good in the Beast and Emperor lineup. It gets you your dudes, and it's just another way of playing it. So if you're going with that line, where you're playing like all the Emperors and all the Beasts and everything, you're trying to go up that line, you play 3 of this card, because it cheeses out good old V-Jom. This is actually like an improved version of an anime card that we never got printed that did basically the same thing, summoning a V-Jom from your deck. Except that was a counter trap that also ended the battle phase. I don't know why we couldn't have gotten that, Konami. But, however, that's my biggest other issue. It only summons V-Jom from deck on that first attack declaration. If it summoned it from deck or grave or hand as well, then we'd be talking about maybe playing it in the standard build. But right now, it's only really a one-of in the standard build of Cubics, if you want to play it even at all, which I don't personally recommend. But if you're adamant about it, it's a decent one-of, mainly for its graveyard effect. Then we got Cubic Rebirth. This card, I really liked it before Lynx came out, and then Lynx came out and made it horrible. So Cubic Rebirth. Normal trap card. When an opponent's monster clears a direct attack, target the attacking monster. Your opponent special summons, in attack position, as many monsters as possible from your hand, deck, and or graveyard with the same name as that monster. Also, the attack of the target monster and those special summon monsters becomes 0, and place 1 cubic counter on each. Monsters with a cubic counter can attack and has their effects negated. Also, after that, if any cubic counters are placed by this effect, special summon 1 level 4 or lower cubic monster from your hand, ignoring its summoning conditions. This was a really cool way of being able to play, well, this card is basically like super good in the Emperor Beast lineup, okay? Because it summons your 3 monsters to your opponent's field, all gives them 0 attack, all gives them Cupid counters, so then your beasts and your emperors can run them over. There's just one issue. This does nothing to stop your opponent from going main phase 2, Link summon. Or main phase 2, XC summon. Main phase 2, Tribute summon. You just gave them 2 more monsters they can do anything with. And that is horrible. Horrible. My god. This card was so decent before Links. Especially since not everybody played XCs, not everybody played Synchros. It was really mean if like you summoned like multiple XCs in graveyard or something. But like with Links, your opponent can just go, okay, make Unicorn. You know? God, don't play this card. It's not good anymore. It was arguably not good before, but it's even worse now. And then we got the almost good card. Cubic Mandala. Continuous trap card. If you control a cubic monster, activate this card by targeting any number of monsters that are in your opponent's graveyard, because they were destroyed and sent there this turn. Special summon them to your opponent's field, but each of their attack becomes 0 and has 1 cubic counter placed on it. You know what cubic counters do. While your opponent controls any of the monsters summoned by this effect, negate any monster effect your opponent activates. When the last of these monsters leaves the field, we can destroy this card. So, again, this card does basically what Rebirth does, okay? Where it's supposed to set it up so that you have a bunch of monsters with 0 attacks, so that your dudes can run them over so you can rank them up. Cool. The issue, again, is that actually activating this card is a bit tricky, because typically speaking, it won't happen until main phase 2. Or if you get lucky, like main phase 1, Regeki, and then you activate this card. But, however, that's not going to be very, very often. If this card just said target any number of monsters equal to number of cubics you control, special summon them, drop their attack to 0, you know, put a cubic counter on them, that would be decent, because then you could actually do it proactively instead of reactively. And because of that issue, I cannot recommend this card at all. It's got a nice little effect negation thing, preventing your opponent from activating any monster effects, which is really, really mean. But, however, it just doesn't do enough. This card is not good. Don't play it. It wasn't good before. It wasn't good now. If it just had a better activation condition or a better way of utilizing those monsters, I could make an argument for it. But I cannot do that right now, as is. So, that is everything. What are my overall thoughts on Cubics? Well, the first and foremost, they're a very potent OTK deck. And they're very easy to learn deck too, by the way. If you are a new player to Yu-Gi-Oh!, I recommend picking up Cubics. It's an easy to learn deck, it's a lot of fun, and it's just a really good rogue deck overall. Crimson Nova and Duza carry the deck, so you basically know what you're going to be going for, and all your combos involve them in some way, shape, or form. So, if you're a new player, I do recommend Cubics. You're going to be able to learn a lot with this deck, okay? The next thing is that this deck is in dire need of more good monsters. And by that, I mean, I would really like to see them release more monsters that direct away from the line of the Emperors and the Beasts, if that makes any sense. Like, just kind of just diverge away from that, and really focus on that utility aspect of the deck. The best monsters in this deck, aside from the boss monster Crimson Nova, are utility cards. Focus on that. Give us more stuff that enables us to cheese out the Beasts and the Emperors, or maybe summons more stuff. Like, could you imagine a cubic that was basically like a gold gadget where you normal summon it and then summon any cubic from your hand, ignoring summoning conditions? That would be wonderful. Or heck, a way to like revive somebody from graveyard, normal summons, bring it back. Heroes just got that with Liquid Man a while ago. And so, it'd be nice to see this deck get something like that. The biggest way that I really think that this deck needs to improve, though, is a way to search out its spells and traps. It just has no way of doing that right now, and that really hinders the deck in a lot of ways, because you basically have to play 3 of everything in order to be able to see it, and that isn't always the greatest thing in the world. Now, this isn't so much of a necessary thing, but I do think it would be cool, but I would like to see new fusions or a Link monster. You know, take advantage of the Link climbing this deck can do. Give us some Links. Or, better yet, give us some fusions, because the deck does have a dedicated fusion card. I almost always want to say fusion spell, but it's a trap. A dedicated fusion trap. Give us some more fusions. Make it so that like we have a fusion of like Ygopro with Indiora, or I mean I guess he kind of is, because if you look in the artwork you can always find Ygopro somewhere, because he is technically like all the cubics are technically a bunch of Ygopro combining to make the bigger cubics. But like give us a fusion, you know, like imagine like Indiora combining with Buster Gundil or something like that. Give us like Buster Indiora or something. I don't know. It'd be cool. And it'd be really nice just to get more fusions and give the fusion trap more utility. But I digress, it's not like the end of the world if we don't ever get any more fusions or a link. So that is everything. Now here is my favorite build of cubics. This is the standard build I usually go with, and it is pretty consistent. So this is a focus on the standard OTK build. We got 3 Crimson Nova here. 1 gold, 1 silver gadget, because when you summon them, Duza is machine, so you can cheese out Duza from your hand a bit easier. You got 3 Duza. You got 3 Summoner Monk, because you want to get your spells in graveyard, and so we got all the good targets for that with these 3 here. Karma, well, no, Karma, Wave, and Dharma. You want all these in your graveyard and be able to cheese them out a bit easier. Then we got 1 Indiora and 1 Buster Gundil, just for extra names. This is really interesting. Genix Ally Birdman. He combos really well in his deck because you can target your good old Duza on your field, bounce him to your hand, and then special summon him. Effective unification in your graveyard, special summon another good old Duza, and then Duza will dump another unification. You make your synchro or your link play, typically speaking, like FA Dawn Dragster. Or you can go for good old Black Rose Dragon, and whatever you summon, like off of unification, won't be disturbed by Black Rose. It's just something really funny there. So that is something to keep in mind too. Then I got 2 Ash Blossom, 2 Ghost Ogre, 2 Effect Filler. You'll notice I dropped Causality in this build. You can still play Causality, but however, if you're gonna do that, drop Effect Filler. They basically do the same thing, but Effect Filler is better in most situations. Since you're going second with this deck, Causality just isn't particularly great. I would side Causality more than I would anything else, because you need Causality on your first turn, but however, you can't activate it from your hand. And since this is a go second deck, you need ways to stop your opponent from doing stuff, and that's why I'm playing 2 Ash, 2 Ghost Ogre, 2 Effect Filler. You can't play 3 of each, because then they start bricking too heavily in the deck, and his deck cannot afford that, so 2 of each has been working fine for me. And then 3 good old Ygopro here for, well, being Ygopro. Then we got, of course, 3 Wave, 3 Karma, 3 Dharma, just be able to, you know, do crap tons of damage, search, and recur, as well as also draw cards. 3 Pot of Desires for the extra consistency, because God, this deck needs it. I don't recommend activating Desires until you have at least 1 Crimson Nova in your hand. I cannot tell you how many times where I've blind desired and banished all 3 Crimson Nova. Once you do that, you might as well just quit. Okay? Because once you do that, you are relying entirely on your extra deck plays, and it's not good. So don't activate Desires until you have at least 1 Crimson Nova in your hand. Then we got 2 Fool's Burial Goods to get our stuff in the graveyard easier. And then finally 3 Unification to dump it in the graveyard for good old Duza and utilizing its effects. Down here, the extra can basically be whatever you want. I'll be 100% honest, it can be just how loose it is. The only things I absolutely say you should have is FA Dawn Dragster for the negation, Black Rose, and then of course Crimson Nova Trinity, which you don't really need, but hey, it's just 1 slot in this deck. Its extra deck is super loose, so hey, go at it. So for the links, I got 1 IP Masquerena, good old Nightmare Phoenix, Nightmare Unicorn, Apollousa, Boral Sword, just kind of general utility, good stuff here. 1 Dugaris, Abyss Dweller, Dagusto Emerald, Castel, Tornado Dragon, Gustav Max, and Dora, the Explora train here. So basically, in general, just all utility stuff that I know will come up every once in a while, or stuff that is going to come up a lot. You can also totally take out Dora here, Super Dora, for a Baguska if you really want to. It's down to you. And also, of course, the meta. Now that is the standard build that I really like. Then you got this build, which is a build that I've been testing around with to try and improve the deck with good old freaking Magician Souls. So basically this is a Perform Mage build where you are focusing on dumping stuff with... Why do I have Cubic Rebirth here? I think that was meant to be Cubic Causality. Okay, ignore that. I don't know what that's doing here. I think that's supposed to be Cubic Causality. But anyway, so... yeah, this is just in general, you know, summon 3 dudes, you know, just generally trying to improve it. The main thing here is Stilt Shooter here, and this is the main thing that like inspired me along with Magician Souls, because Magician Souls allows you to send your stuff to draw 2, which basically makes it an almost better Summoner Monk. But however, the big thing here is with Magician Souls, you have to have some level 6 spellcaster to send to Graveyard, and that's where Stilt's Launcher comes in play. Because Stilt's Launcher, if it's in the graveyard and you activate an effect that would do battle damage, effect damage to your opponent while you have another Perform Mage in your graveyard, you can banish it to boost that damage by 2,000, turning Crimson Nova into a 5,000 burner. That's really good. Try that out. I really like it. It's something that's been working okay, but personally I still prefer the standard build, just mainly because it's not been really working out too well here. But then again, I also haven't tested this out as much thoroughly. This is over years that I've tested this build and came to it. But this is something that I really made more in the spur of the moment to try out. And it's worked. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it's something to keep in mind for some ideas and experimentation. Again, though, this should be Cubic Causality. I don't know why Cubic Rebirth is here. So that is everything I have to talk about Cubics. Again, this is one of my favorite archetypes. The deck is a lot of fun. Give it a try if you haven't. You know, I'll do a more thorough deck profile probably later. At least I've done multiple, to be honest. But however, what do you guys think about Cubics? What did you like the video? What are your thoughts and opinions? Rate, comment, and subscribe, everybody. Thank y'all for watching. Have a great day. And hey, if it's your birthday, happy birthday. See y'all later. Peace out. Thank you all for watching the video. Have a great day. If it's your birthday, happy birthday. Rate, comment, and subscribe. And see y'all later.